everybody. Welcome back to another episode of Gaming the System, the podcast where intersectional feminists examine gaming through a feminist lens. Today we are Matt and Jem, and we are on the penultimate episode of our series on The Last of Us, which is the final episode of the actual series of The Last of Us. So we've had like a month to decompress. It feels like it's been years since it happened because it was such an intense, 9-episode run. And so, yeah, we're going to go through sort of chapter by chapter of this episode and just talk our way through it and see what happens. But before we started, something even more exciting than our Patreon, which is patreon.com/gamingthesystem, where you can support us and get some exclusive content. Gaming the System is doing an actual in-person live show. Okay, so after 2.5 years, we are going to be live on stage, and it's so super exciting. And where and when it is, there is a Comic-Con, an anime and Comic-Con in Cardiff on the 9th and the 10th of September. Okay, and we don't know precisely when on those 2 days we're going to be. But if you go on anime, I should get the picture up on it because it's so cool. I'll do it on the next episode. You'll be able to see Gaming the System on the long list of guests. So we know for a fact that we have at least one listener in Wales. So whoever you may be, find a way, beg, borrow, steal, get tickets to come and see us. And yeah, we'd love to meet anyone who wants to come along. So with that the business taken care of, the beginning of the episode, which when I was writing my notes before we started, I completely forgot about this. Ellie's birth, with Ellie's mother played by the actress who played Ellie herself in the games. And it was so tense and just I thought it was incredible. What did you think of it?
Well, I did not know that it was the same actress, actually. Back then, I didn't know that, so that is even more awesome. Yeah, it was a really intense scene. It was a really I just really like shows when they show women, who are dealing with pregnancy and birth in a kind of bonkers situation, because I think when we talk about post-apocalypse or war zones or whatever, we always think about the people that are fighting or the people that are escaping, but then there's a whole bunch of people whose lives are still continuing, and if you are pregnant, then that is still happening, and it doesn't matter that this is a really inconvenient moment to have a baby if it's happening. And so I thought it was really kind of heartbreaking and cool and scary, and just like the way that was attacked and going through all of that while all of it was extremely intense. It was just, what a way for a life to come into the world. No wonder she's such a little fighter, Ellie.
Yeah, I thought that, because I can't remember what the actress's name was, but sorry, the actress is Ashley, I think. Actress, regardless, I can't remember either of their names then. But she fights so hard. She is just like Ellie when she's running through the forest, barricading herself in. She fights as hard as she possibly can. And just like Ellie, she just gets bitten. Ellie fights as hard as she possibly can and gets bitten. And just this, that it's really interesting that they provide like some canon, some explanation of why Ellie is immune. And it's just one of those like perfect stars aligning accidents that she's immune. And it's just trying every time you see a bite in this show, it feels so impactful and dreadful straight away, because you go, oh, everything that person was and had plans to do is over. But it's not as simple as they died and it being over. They've got to sit knowing it's over. And just the fact of her fighting and giving birth while she's fighting, that was cool. And yeah, just literally the second the baby's out, she looks at his arm bitten and then cuts the cord, and think I can't imagine. She played it so well. Can you imagine having to take care of yourself, going, I've been bitten, I'm going to die, and not knowing if your baby has been infected, and knowing that you probably won't survive to find out. And that if anyone knows that anyone apart from Marlene knows about the bite, they would probably have just left the baby there as well. And when Marlene comes in and she's holding the knife to her neck, and that was just all of it such an intense sort of 5 minutes, and just a little masterpiece of a short story that was completely nothing in the books, and nothing in the games. I want to end up talking about Marlene quite a lot in this episode of the debrief, because pretty much everything revolves around her, because she's the one that is there at Ellie's birth, and she's the one that Ellie goes to when she's been bitten, which I think is fascinating. I don't know why she would have chosen Marlene to go to. And then she sets her off on the journey with Joel, and then later on in the episode, we know what she does, and she's there the entire time. Did this scene make you? How did it impact how you see Marlene?
Well, I think Marlene's a really interesting character because she's just trying to save the world, really, at the end of the day. That's what she sees. But I think that I think she is, because, she is effectively Ellie's guardian. But who is there at, just moments after her birth, and Ellie being put into her care, she holds a responsibility for Ellie. So, I mean, we don't know what Ellie and Marlene's relationship is really in any kind of detail. As you say, Ellie does go to her when she's bitten, and, there is clearly some level of trust between them. But in the end, Marlene's got to make this ultimate sacrifice. So I think in some ways you can see her as being quite calculating about it, because she talks about Ellie as I think she says the host when she's discussing what they're going to do. And so that a bit distant, but I think with this scene, we get the sort of another layer of what's going on between her and Ellie, that this is it, in the same way as a sacrifice or fails to make a sacrifice. Marlene is making a sacrifice, and she has a relationship with Ellie as well, and I think, it's an impossible situation. It's a Sophie's Choice scenario, which is a very old as time storyline, and I think it's also really interesting for me that in this situation, the earlier situation, you've got this sort of these three. You've got got Ellie's mum, Ellie herself. These three females in this situation. It's a really it looks at a lot of stuff. I think I think there's a lot going on below the surface of that, in the subtext about what it means to be a parent. And I think Joel comes into what it means to be a parent, what it means to be a woman, what it means to care for people, and where does that care stop? Is it to the people in your direct care, or is your responsibility a wider scale, a more international, humanity-wide scale? So not any of those things.
Yeah, just there's so many. They've done a good job in painting, expanding this universe to show that there aren't good people. No one is just good, just a good guy.
Mm-hmm.
The one thing that I can't come on to it a bit later, actually. So we'll move on to part 2. So we've looked at Ellie's birth. We've looked at why she's immune. We know that, pointing out that right at the beginning of this episode, that Marlene was there at the start. And one thing that interests me is why Marlene gave Ellie to Fedra. Because she's supposed to be fighting against Fedra, which means that she hopes that she's going to defeat Fedra, which would make sense to keep Ellie with them. But by giving Ellie to Fedra, that implies that she believes that Fedra is a safe and stable place, and that's just an interesting thing that I picked up. So we jump forward in time to where we see in the game, where Joel and Ellie are almost there, at the almost arrived at the hospital, and it just has that feeling of tragedy on the horizon, because Joel has finally relaxed and he thinks everything's going to be okay. I can be the dad that I was to Sarah, and Ellie's going to be my daughter, and everything's going to be okay. But Ellie is quiet and distant, and it's just, did you get that? How did it feel in the show compared to as in the game to you? Do you think?
I think I had the same feeling actually. I mean, in the show, I suppose the fundamental difference is that in the show, you know how far away from the end you are. So, because you've just got 45 minutes left or whatever. And in the game, you know, that's one of the joys of these games. One of the joys and one of the challenges is that you often don't know when you're at the end, and then you find out you're only a quarter of the way in, and other times you think you've got another few hours of gameplay, and then suddenly it's done. So I feel like they kind of replicated the whole, you know, the distance of Ellie. I think they built it up more in the show than in the game. But it did have this feel of impending doom. But, you know, again, that's our appreciation of the tropes, isn't it? You know, that it's always, you always know that like disaster is just around the corner when everyone's at their happiest. You know, especially if you're a fan of these kind of shows, then you've probably watched Walking Dead, and disaster is always behind the corner whenever anyone has anything happy. You know, I think it's sort of there in the back of your mind, like, oh, this can't last. But I also think that we're not stupid, you know, viewers, and whether or not you'd played the game, you know, there's concerns about what is going to happen to Ellie. You know, it's not unreasonable for us to think like, is she going to survive this process? Or how so many don't get taken by the scientists because they will chop your head off. You know, we're already taught that. So I think that sort of feeling was already there. I wonder what you think Ellie thinks is going to happen when she gets there at this point.
That's a good question. When I played the game, so I found out about the ending before I played the game. And I remember in the leading up to that bit, that moment. So the core of the entire series and the first game, the second game, the entire universe is centered on Joel killing the Doctor. That's how I see. That's what makes the Last of Us universe go around and make sense and be extraordinary, right? So right up to that point, I was thinking Ellie's going to be fine. They're not going to let Ellie die. So for building all that, I didn't think that Ellie was going to die. And then all the way through the rampage, I think Ellie's not going to die. Thinking that, oh yeah, he's just going to rescue her and run away, and then it's going to be fine. That's what I expected would happen. So that was me knowing everything that was going to happen beforehand. Mm-hmm. Looking at Ellie, she clearly, it's not clear at all. Joel thinks everything's going to be fine, and I'll turn it back on you. What do you think? What do you think she thought?
I think she knew. I think she knows that she's likely to be sacrificing her life for this. I'm okay with that, actually, because Joel gives her in both, I think he gives her the option very clearly, and he asks if she wants to, and she's like, what that we have to do. And I think that she did know, and she was prepared to do what it took, because it's a shit world that they're in, and she wants to do what she can do to stop that. And I'm really surprised that Joel didn't know what could happen, or hadn't at least been. He's not a very trusting guy. He's not he's not actually a very good guy by many of our sort of judgments. So, you know, he clearly to think to think, about doing things that need to be done, and it doesn't matter who, he's killed hundreds of people to get her there. He's killed hundreds of people in his life to, reasons he's had, and so I don't understand why Joel didn't at least think things might not turn out until he realizes. That's what I don't get. I don't get why because it was, like you say, it's not that they suddenly got that they got there, and at that point he realizes that he's bonded with Ellie. He recognizes that earlier on, before they reach the final destination, and I think it just that felt like, I don't know whether he was in just denial because it was too conflicting what was going on, or whether it was maybe bad writing. I don't know. I hate to say that because I love this series, but it just feels incongruous to me.
I think that Ellie has her like spider sense, and she knows that something, like with David, for example, her spider sense failed her because David is a kind of predator that she has never encountered before. So she knows that she had a bad feeling about him and almost died, almost lost, came to within a hair's breadth of something happening to her that she had never imagined before. And we see her in the way that she kills David and the way she kills Troy Baker's character. She will, and her mother, she will do whatever it takes. She will cut down legions of people to survive. And then in the second game, from the start that she's turns it from survival to revenge. So that kind of fight the violent heart that David is right about. She knows that her spider sense is tingling, and she's not certain of whether she's going to want to fight. She's thinking, my survival sense is going, something bad's going to happen. And Joel is completely oblivious. I think he is incapable of imagining it. That's why she doesn't talk to him. So she's there going, my life might be threatened soon. And it's not as simple as you fight, you just fight and fight and fight.
Yeah.
When it comes to Joel, one criticism that I have from the series as a whole, and I don't know whether it's just a difference. I think in the game, Joel is an intensely emotional person, but he doesn't know how to express it. He has the feelings and the emotions, but he can't talk about it the way that the TV show Joel does, which is why Joel feels things implicitly, whereas this Joel feels things very explicitly, which you can tell by him opening up to Ellie about him trying to shoot himself. Because I don't know if that was what Joel in the game did. But it was things that are spoken in the show are things that didn't need to be spoken in the game. I think, because we got to this point. We know he's like a daughter to. She's like a daughter to him. We know that he's found this again. We know how he feels, and it just felt a bit blunt to have that sort of the emotional crescendo of their relationship being, you healed me, not time. Yeah, he.
But I do think that, you know, a lot of these shows state the bleeding obvious a little bit too much. You know,
Yeah.
there are so many times where I'm like, well, obviously we know that, you know, or when they do like a zoom in on something and you're like, we knew that was you don't need to treat us like total idiots. But I wonder whether maybe they feel they do, or it's difficult because if, you know, having played the game, I know the story, so you know that those things do feel a bit obvious, but maybe other people who haven't played the game needed that little bit of extra kind of, you know, underlining of the in a way that I didn't feel like it needed it. It's
Yeah, it's the over exposition of things that you just go, and also it's a good little story to have that happen to him, but I
yeah.
don't think it's.
No, it doesn't.
I don't think it was.
It doesn't hurt. Yeah.
And it also adds. It's just a bit of a blunt way to put you in his headspace for what he does later, and it makes more sense. Whereas I feel like it made it so much more devastating because we didn't know exactly what he was thinking and feeling as he does it.
No.
So they're almost there. They're talking. The pun book comes out, and that is when they've gone back to. They're relaxed together. It feels like they were sort of on different pages, and then they got there and go, okay, I'm good to go. You're good to go. Let's do this.
Yeah.
And then the flashbang comes in, and then Joel wakes up in the hospital with Marlene there, and so Marlene, we get a really interesting sort of spectrum of leaders in this show, because we've had Joel has never been a leader in anything apart from before the apocalypse. His daughter was kind of the leader. The only one who followed him was Tommy, and we know that he led Tommy to do really terrible things. And when he's with Tess is the one who is in charge of that. And then we've got Marlene, we've got David, we've got Kathleen, we've got Henry. Yeah, so we've got a very long list of these leaders. But I think a really important quality that I think I've only really picked up as I try and criticize these characters is that a lot of the good leaders are dead. The world killed the good leaders because Kathleen's brother, they say he was a great man, but he didn't change anything. So Kathleen, the leaders like Kathleen, who are incredibly flawed and aren't suited to be the leader. And I really think that Marlene is just not a good, rather than the writers writing a bad leader, her character is not suited to be a leader, because throughout every time we see her, she is making a terrible mistake. So right from Ellie being born, why would you leave a pregnant woman alone in the apocalypse for whatever reason? That's a terrible decision. She arguably giving Ellie to Fedra, that's uncertain. And then when she gives Ellie to Joel and Tess. That feels like, so when she finds out what Ellie is, she sort of panics and tries to get things done as quickly as possible, and that leads to all of the Fireflies that she's with dying, and Fireflies are getting caught and hanged. She tries to get the car battery, and all of her people die, and she gets wounded. Terrible mistake. And then Joel and Tess. So it being that is a complete fluke that Joel was capable of doing this. I've got much more to say about Marlene, but we'll stick with this in the moment bit here. It's awful. It's awful. How did you experience that scene between Marlene and Joel?
Well, I think it was an impossible situation for her. I think she was in an impossible situation. And I think that I think you're probably right. I hadn't really thought of her decisions as being as you've described them, but I can't really argue against your summation, to be fair. So, let's say that she herself in this position and she's just simply not very good at it. I think there is a problem with these kind of elliptic worlds in that they always revert to type. So there's always this idea, this trope that in a sticky situation, the biggest assholes will rise to the top. And that is, it's most violent people. It's always the most inconsiderate people. It's always the most aggressive and bullying types. And I understand why writers think that, but I'm not convinced that it is actually how things would be. And I think Marlene's a really good example of the sort of person who is not really any of those things and yet still finds herself in this position of leadership. And, because I think in reality, if you look at like leaders in the real world, they're more often than not there by happy happenstance or accidents than by by having necessarily the skills to be in those roles. I mean, if we look at the people that lead our businesses, they're usually people who've just sort of worked their way up and got lucky and happen to have promotions or speak to the right person in the lift. And even if you look at our sort of political leaders, they're just the people that looked it the right way so that the public voted for them. They just happen to have said the right thing at the right time. So, we don't necessarily have the right people in the jobs. We do have people who happen to be in the right place at the right time. And so I think that what sets Marlene apart from everyone else in her leadership role is that she is the most believable one of the sort of person who gets put in those positions. Somebody who is making imperfect decisions with imperfect information, and she's not getting it right all the time, but she's trying to do her best in a bad situation. I don't think that she's necessarily a good person, and I think that, as you pointed out earlier, that there isn't that idea of good or bad. It doesn't really exist in this world. Everybody is fundamentally flawed in the world, and I'm well into the Last of Us 2 game at the moment, and Ellie is not a nice person. She is a nice person, and I'm not surprised. because of the setting. But yeah, I think this is, but this is reality. People aren't all good or all bad. People, do what they need to do, and I think that's what's going on here. So I felt that conversation between her and Joel was, a tough conversation. And also they have known each other for a long time, and there's a sort of ultimate betrayal going on here. It's a dilemma that they don't have time to untangle and discuss in a civilized manner. So yeah, it's heartbreaking, really. But if Joel had been a bit more on the ball, maybe he would have been able to have thought it through a little bit more before he got to that situation.
I don't remember if I didn't think that Joel and Marlene knew each other beforehand. I thought that they, because he's not really interested in the Fireflies, and
oh no, yeah, they got brought together by Tess, didn't they? Tess knew Marlene.
Yeah, and so I think that
was it Tess did them? Yeah, okay.
We hope you enjoyed that episode of Gaming the System. If you want to support us, you can donate to us through our PayPal by sending it to wearegamingthesystem@gmail.com if you want to send us a one-off donation. If you want to donate to us monthly, you can subscribe to our Patreon at patreon.com/gamingthesystem. Until next time, bye-bye.